Ribble, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank Ranking Member Van Hollen. I've had a good working relationship with both of you gentlemen, and it's been helpful in this bipartisan effort. I want to thank the committee this morning for holding this hearing. As a former member of the committee, I'm happy to be back today to express my views on Congress' current budget process and how I believe we can improve it to make Congress work better, smarter, and more efficiently. I believe that biennial budgeting reform has 228 co-sponsors supporting it because the current budget process has simply not worked, and it's only gotten worse. Since the Congressional Budget Act was enacted in 1974, Congress has never passed both a budget resolution and all of its appropriation bills on time in the same year. Never. Not even once. And you can see in the slide, it gets worse in election years. In the 40-year history of the current budget process, only one time has Congress enacted a budget resolution on time in an election year. That was in 1976, just 2 years after the 74 Act was signed into law. In fact, in the last 17 years, Congress has failed to even pass a budget in election years 77% of the time. Because of Congress' failure to complete its work, we're forced to rely on continuing resolutions or omnibus appropriation bills that are hastily passed, usually without improvements to programs that could come from effective oversight. Given 4 decades of failure, let me explain why I feel biennial budgeting should be part of the solution. First, biennial budgeting will provide greater certainty by moving the budget decisions furthest away from election year politics, greatly enhancing the likelihood of passing a budget and providing a budget in election year. It's not lost on me that the majority of our colleagues on the House Armed Services Committee support this effort in part for that reason. Second, having a budget for 2 years will reduce the need for frequent stopgap measures like continuing resolutions. CRs aren't just bad government, they're missed opportunities for Congress to put its stamp on how the executive branch should operate. Third, moving to a biennial process would free up more time on the House floor to tackle mandatory spending and tax policy and other essential work. The 2016 congressional calendar has only 12 work weeks from May through September. In essence, the only thing Congress will do next summer is appropriations. Biennial budgeting opens up more time for Congress to do all of its work. If you could bring up the second slide. Fourth, not only will biennial budgeting tilt Congress' focus to oversight, it will also reduce the use it or lose it mentality that wastes precious taxpayer dollars at the end of every fiscal year. Nearly 20% of all federal spending occurs in the last few weeks of the year, and nearly a $35 billion increase in average spending on the last week. In week 52, I'd like you to look at the top 3 slides there. That high line is the last week of spending. That's week 52. On average, it's a $35 billion. I want to repeat that, a $35 billion spike in spending in the last week. So we can fix this. I realize that any reform proposals put forth, some will favor the status quo. That's most certainly the case here. There's certain comfort with what you know, even when you know it isn't working. No organization on the planet embraces the status quo like the Congress of the United States. We should not let the perfect become the enemy of the good, nor should we let comfort with the status quo become a barrier to fixing a broken system. Now, I don't argue that biennial budgeting is a panacea because it isn't, and those who oppose it offer some key critiques, and I'd like to take a moment to respond. First, critics argue that politics is to blame, not the annual budgeting process, and quite frankly, that opinion is not without merit. But that isn't a critique of biennial budgeting, it's a critique of Congress as a whole. It is politics that have kept us from budgeting at all in election years. If anything, biennial budgeting improves the outlook and steers the process away from politics rather than toward it. Members of both parties can and should work together more often, as they have done with this piece of legislation. Let's not let politics stop this bipartisan effort. Second, critics argue that supplemental appropriation bills will be needed too often, and that is through the appropriations process that you eliminate waste. Regarding supplemental approps, history has shown us Congress tends to write supplemental appropriation bills sparingly. There's absolutely no reason to believe that that would change under biennial budgeting. Regarding waste, one only needs to look at the Washington Post data to see the failure in ending wasteful spending. In conclusion, biennial budgeting is an idea whose time has come. The House is seeking to work its will, Mr. Chairman. I would like to bring up slide number 3. And I want to show you the broad bipartisan support in this Congress. In fact, during the last Congress, and just a little over a year ago, this very committee passed this exact same bill with your supporting vote, Mr. Chairman. Since I have been in Congress, this was the only bill passed out of the House Budget Committee on recorded vote that had broad bipartisan support. And I have members from the Republican Study Committee, the Tuesday Group, the Freedom Caucus, the Blue Dog Coalition, the New Democrat Coalition, and the Progressive Caucus, all as co-sponsors on this bill. That hardly ever happens in this Congress. Hardly ever. However, support is not just inside the Congress. If you could bring up slide 4. We have broad support outside from both conservative and progressive groups. That said, I know the bill could use some tweaking. I want all of you in this committee to know that I'm eager and ready to work with you to improve the bill as it moves forward. But time is of the essence, and I encourage you to promptly move to a markup and continue this important work. There's a bipartisan majority of members of this committee on this bill. Once again, thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ribble. Appreciate it.